Here is something that should bother you. Right now, in virtually every major American city, there are office buildings sitting empty. Not temporarily vacant, not in between tenants, structurally, permanently empty. Buildings that were worth hundreds of millions of dollars 5 years ago that nobody wants, nobody can sell, and nobody can refinance. And the banks that lent money against those buildings are doing something fascinating. They're pretending everything is fine. And if you've been wondering why regional banks keep appearing in financial news for the wrong reasons, why commercial property valuations feel frozen despite being widely understood to be impaired, or why certain corners of the credit market feel quietly tighter than they should, the answer isn't the Fed. It isn't inflation. It's a slow-motion reckoning playing out across the American banking system right now, and it has a name. It's called extend and pretend. To understand why this matters, you have to go back to March 2020, because the pandemic didn't just kill office attendance temporarily. It fundamentally rewired the relationship between American workers and physical office space. Remote work, which used to be a fringe benefit offered by tech companies to attract engineers, became the default operating mode for roughly a third of the American workforce almost overnight. And when the world reopened, something unexpected happened. A significant chunk of those workers didn't come back to the office, not fully. And that shift from 5 days in the office to 2 or 3 didn't just reduce coffee shop revenue. It effectively destroyed the demand model that commercial real estate had been built on for decades. Because here's how commercial real estate works. Office buildings are valued based on something called the cap rate model, which essentially ties the building's value to the income it generates from tenants. And when occupancy drops, income drops, and when income drops, the building's valuation drops. Simple math. Except the problem is that nobody wants to acknowledge the new math, because acknowledging it has consequences. Think of it like this. Imagine you own a rental property worth $1 million at least. That's what the appraisal said in 2019. But in 2024, your tenant is only using half the space and refuses to renew the full lease. The building is technically worth maybe $500,000 now. But your mortgage is still based on the $1 million valuation, and your bank, which lent you $700,000 against it, still has that loan on their books at face value. Nobody has marked it down. The loss exists. It's just sitting there, undisclosed, like a check engine light that everyone agreed to put a piece of tape over. And this is what extend and pretend actually means. When a commercial real estate loan comes due, and the borrower can't refinance at current rates against a property that is now worth significantly less than the loan balance, the bank has 2 options. Option 1 is to force a sale, recognize the loss, and take the hit on the balance sheet. Option 2 is to quietly roll the loan over, give the borrower more time, and hope that rates fall and valuations recover before anyone has to face the math. And right now, an enormous number of banks are choosing option 2. Here's why that matters. Because there is roughly $1.5 trillion in commercial real estate loans that needed to be refinanced in 2024 and 2025. This is what analysts started calling the maturity wall, a concentrated wave of debt coming due in an environment of elevated interest rates and structurally impaired property values. And a significant portion of that debt sits on the balance sheets of regional banks, not the Citus and JP Morgans of the world, which have diversified loan books and enough scale to absorb pain. The banks most exposed here are the ones with $2 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion in total assets. The banks people have actually never heard of. And collectively, regional banks hold somewhere between 60 and 70% of all outstanding commercial real estate loans in the United States. And if this is starting to sound vaguely familiar, it should, because we have seen this movie before. Not in 2008, that crisis was primarily residential. The closer historical parallel is the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s and early 1990s. Because back then, savings and loan institutions, which were essentially the regional banks of their era, had been deregulated and allowed to aggressively expand into commercial real estate lending. And when the real estate market turned, those loans went bad faster than the institutions could absorb. Over 1,000 savings and loan associations failed. The government bailout eventually cost taxpayers around $130 billion, which in today's money is substantially more, and the key feature of that crisis was the exact same dynamic we're. As economist Hyman Minsky observed, stability breeds instability. The longer a system appears calm, the more hidden risk tends to accumulate beneath the surface. and the commercial real estate system spent a decade appearing very calm. Now here is where the ripple effects start, because the damage from impaired commercial real estate doesn't stay contained to banks and landlords, it spreads. Because property taxes on commercial real estate are one of the primary revenue sources for American cities. When office building valuations fall, assessed values fall, and property tax revenues fall with them. And cities built their budget projections on pre-pandemic commercial property values, which means cities like San Francisco, Chicago, and New York, which are already dealing with elevated office vacancy rates, are looking at a slow erosion of the tax base that funds schools, infrastructure, and municipal services. It's the kind of thing that doesn't show up as a crisis in any single quarter. It just makes every budget negotiation slightly harder than the last one. And then there's the pension fund angle, because the two largest institutional investors in commercial real estate are insurance companies and pension funds. And pension funds, the same retirement systems that teachers, firefighters, and state employees depend on, have significant allocations to commercial real estate, both directly and through real estate investment trusts and private funds. And many of those valuations are still being carried at marks that reflect a pre-pandemic world. Which means the stress in commercial real estate isn't just a bank problem, it's quietly sitting inside the retirement savings of millions of Americans. And here's the part that makes this structurally complicated. Because the Federal Reserve cannot solve this problem the way it solved the 2020 crisis. In 2020, the problem was liquidity, the system needed cheap money, and the Fed could provide it immediately. The commercial real estate problem is a solvency problem. The buildings are worth less. The loans are too large, and cutting rates back to 2% doesn't restore office demand. It just makes it slightly cheaper to keep pretending the losses don't exist. And this is exactly why traditional financial media isn't screaming about this every week. Because extend and pretend, by definition, looks fine on the surface. Bank balance sheets appear healthy. Loan delinquency rates are still relatively contained. Nobody has officially declared a crisis. And so the narrative stays focused on things that move faster and generate more clicks. Rate decisions, AI earnings. Whatever happened in the market today. But the pattern here is not subtle. Regional bank stress, commercial property valuations quietly declining, loan extensions accumulating, municipal revenue projections built on a world that no longer exists. These aren't isolated data points. They're the same constellation of signals that has preceded every major slow-motion credit event in modern financial history. The question isn't whether the commercial real estate reckoning happens. The math already happened. The question is just how long the system can keep pretending it didn't. And when you strip it all back, extend and pretend is really just a bet that time solves the problem before reality forces the issue. And sometimes time does solve it. And sometimes the check engine light was telling you something important all along. If you want to keep tracking the risks that are building slowly in the background, the ones that don't trend on Twitter and don't get covered because they require patience instead of a hot take, hit subscribe. Because the goal here has always been the same: to cover the things that actually matter before they're too obvious to ignore.